Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. And thank you for joining us today to hear the findings of our recent research on how telcos are actually deploying AI, which is the hottest technology out there. I should mention at the very start that this session is recorded. And we'll start with a quick introduction from us. My name is Marina Koicheva. I'm a research director at STL Partners, and I have been in the industry for almost 2 decades. I'm joined by my colleagues, Rosalind Craven, senior analyst and strategy lead, and Kirina Naran, who is an analyst working on our telco generative AI adoption tracker. A few housekeeping items before we delve into the topic. You are all in listen-only mode, but if you're having any issues with the audio, please leave a comment in the questions, kind of the tab on your interface, and one of our team members will help you. We will aim to present for no longer than 40 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So please feel free to submit any questions you have throughout the presentation, again, in the questions tab on the interface. And everyone who has registered for this session will receive the slides and the recording after the event. So please feel free to share this with your colleagues. Now, before we get to the meat of the presentation, let me say a few words about who STL is, for those of you who don't know us very well. STL Partners is an advisory company with 2 arms: market research and consulting, where we build bespoke advice. All 3 of us, Rosalind, Kirina, and I, are from the research part of the company. And as a company, we focus entirely on the telecom and technology sectors. Let me just make sure that we are broadcasting, because I have an interesting message here. But yes, we are broadcasting. Apologies. So all 3 of us, Kirina, Rosalind, and I, sit within the research part of the company. And as a company, we focus entirely on the telecom and technology sector. And we always look at the industry and the market from the perspective of finding growth in the future. We are based in the United Kingdom, but we have a truly global client base. We work with large telecom groups and smaller operators in Europe, North America, the Middle East, Africa, and the Asia Pacific region, as well as with companies who partner with telecoms like Intel, Red Hat, Cisco, and so on. Our research areas of expertise are shown here. Our overarching research stream is our executive briefing service, strategy and transformation, which explores all important topics and trends that strategists need to be aware of. New technologies like AI, quantum, 6G. We look at new business models. We look at competition and collaboration with hyperscalers. We look at regulation. We focus a lot on telcos' internal transformation and so on. But we also have specific expertise in these vertical building blocks that you see on the screen. We look at consumer services and advise telcos on how to find new revenue streams beyond their core connectivity. We look at the enterprise segment, and especially at the very hot topic of network APIs, and discuss how telecoms can build platform business models. We have established practices in private mobile networks and edge computing. We have deep expertise in network innovation. So this is the future of infrastructure, telco cloud, non-terrestrial networks, and so on. And last but not least, we spend a lot of time exploring sustainability as a responsibility, but also opportunity for telecoms and their partners. Now, the executive briefing service, so this overarching stream, is the home of artificial intelligence research, where we look at what AI means to telcos, how telcos approach it, what value they get from it. But of course, we also look at AI within each of these vertical building blocks. So, for example, we have specific research for AI in the network, AI in private networks, in the edge, and so on. Now, broadly speaking, our AI research answers these 3 questions. First, what opportunities does AI create for telcos? So we explore how AI brings to telecoms new capabilities to help them address market needs better, to help them build a competitive advantage and to gain new value, be it revenues or profits. Then we also look at what the use cases of AI and Gen AI are and what telcos are actually doing. So a very practical question. And very importantly, we do a lot of research on how to build an organization that can take advantage of AI. So we look at building AI skills, building an AI culture, building partnerships. So the topic for today is the square in the middle, the use cases and the actual implementations of AI in telecom operators. And let's go. So as you know, there is plenty of hype around AI, but we also see pragmatism in telcos. So what do we mean by this? Now, as we all know, unbelievable hype around AI has been part of this industry for more than a year now. And certainly over the last 6-8 months, almost every telco has needed or felt the need to show that it is engaging with AI, at the very least to kind of impress its investors. And in the last year, we have heard so many unrealistic expectations about AI. But importantly, over the last few months, we have also started seeing a lot of pragmatism and actual work on AI within telcos. We see focus within telcos on sorting out their data, building skills, very importantly, and ultimately creating specific use cases and showing and measuring progress. So what are those use cases? First, I'll share with you some insights on use cases generally across AI. Then my colleague Karina will narrow down the focus and talk specifically about current use cases within generative AI. But these will be all use cases that are publicly known. So this is quite an extensive piece of research you will see. And then finally, Rosalind will stay within this more narrow topic of generative AI, but we'll share our expectations about the future use cases. So we'll start with a broader picture, AI as a whole, then go down to generative AI. So starting with the bigger picture, AI in general, where do telcos adopt AI? So I'd like to share just a few short snippets to start us with from a recent research program we executed at STL on behalf of Red Hat. We ran a full webinar on it about 3 weeks ago with a focus on what telcos' AI strategies and priorities are, recommendations on how to build an AI strategy, and a very interesting discussion of the topic with strategists in major companies. So you're very welcome to access the full recording, and the link will hopefully come up in the chat right now. But I will borrow just a few aspects of this research program and show them to you today, which are the actual current use cases. The program itself included 21 in-depth interviews with AI decision makers within telecoms, and you see here the wide geographic spread of interviewees and a roughly even split between leaders within strategy teams and leaders within technology teams in telcos. Now, before we look at the use cases, I just like to spend a minute on the challenges those telco leaders shared when it comes to adopting AI, just to make it very clear that it's not easy. We have identified challenges that we've grouped in 3 buckets, and the biggest one are technical challenges. So we see challenges related to the legacy of infrastructure, be it IT or network infrastructure. There are data challenges. So maybe the data within the telco is not of consistent quality. Maybe it sits in different places within different geographic regions, in different formats. There are challenges around the availability of skills and capabilities, and these are really critical because without the right people, and the right skills, AI is just a nebulous promise. Semiconductor shortages are an issue, especially in some countries where AWS, Google, or Microsoft don't have data centers, but the data needs to be stored locally. So telcos need to source their own chips from NVIDIA, and that's not easy. And finally, content localization is a very important topic, because studies have shown that the further away a culture or language is from the US culture or the kind of Anglo-centric world, the less adequate the current models are, especially the large language models. So these are the technical challenges. And then there are organizational challenges that are linked to cultural resistance. So maybe within some parts of the organization, there's resistance to AI because people are worried about their jobs. Maybe there's a lack of strategy or a buy-in, even up to the very top of the organization in some cases. And then there are regulatory challenges and hurdles. AI is, of course, becoming a regulated space with the AI Act in the EU and regulation in the US and China, but surely there is a lot more to come, and sometimes telcos need to figure out whether they should go early and then adapt to the regulation, or maybe wait a little bit, understand the regulation, and then get going. So all these hurdles exist and need to be overcome. But the 21 telcos we spoke to have acknowledged the hurdles, and yet they have achieved implementations of AI in these 6 areas. So we have network, products and services, sales channels, customer care, marketing, and support functions. And support functions is a bucket in which we have put very important functions like IT, HR, finance, and so on. And if we look in detail, we have counted about 20 distinct use cases within telcos at the moment. As you can see, the largest number are within the network. So predictive maintenance of the network, service assurance, network optimization and planning, power saving, and so on. Within product and services, we also see very interesting implementations, certainly within call center knowledge management. And Kirina will talk a lot about that because that links to Gen AI. We see chatbots as a service, and that's about offering chatbots to telco customers. So telcos offering those to their customers. So that's a revenue opportunity. And again, Kirina will talk about them within the Gen AI domain. We see use cases around sharing data with APIs, via APIs to enterprises and developers. We certainly see AI implemented in sales and channels, a lot around personalization, so personalized pricing and website personalization, certainly demand forecasting. We see, we see AI in customer care and in marketing, and I'll spend a moment on marketing in a second. And of course, we see a lot of AI in very valuable places like coding, where telcos have used AI to fill in gaps where they don't have enough engineers. We see AI used in financial analysis and forecasting, in HR, in recruitment, and that's not really telco specific, and of course in fraud detection. But let me spend a minute talking about a very interesting use case of AI, which is the N=1 customer analytics. And that's a specific, well, before that, actually, let me say that not all of these use cases have the same level of maturity. And in fact, you'll see on this slide that those that are in darker colors are the use cases that telcos have seen more advancement with, and those with lighter colors are the use cases that telcos are just starting with. So as much as there is a lot of hype around AI, the use cases that are actually up and running and delivering are not that many in count. But again, let me take a little bit deeper into this N=1 customer analytics case. And we have this example from MTN, the telco group active within Africa. And N=1 is about segmenting your customers, not down to 10 or 20 or even 100 segments, but down to delivering analytics for each individual customer. So when a customer calls, the operator knows exactly their individual needs, but also any specific issues this customer has experienced. And therefore, the operator is able to deliver the right customer care, but also the right customized package for this specific customer. And MTN has been able to offer very customized data packages and bundles. And as a result of implementing these N=1 use case of AI, MTN has reported increased market share, improvement in the Net Promoter Score, increased customer retention, so lower churn, very importantly, and efficient resource allocation. So, of course, a lot of this was delivered via GenAI, but very, very clear use case which can be measured and replicated in other markets. Now, this is probably a really good time for me to hand over to my colleague, Kirina, and she will show you more use cases specific to GenAI. So over to you, Kirina.
Perfect, thanks, Marina. Last month, so if you go into the next slide, sorry, Marina. Last month, we created a telco generative AI adoption tracker. And as Marina said, this was based on publicly available data. And this lists the expected use cases of generative AI in telecoms, and it tracks actual trials and deployments globally. So if you go on to the next slide, across the world, we have recorded 56 examples of generative AI implementations from 30 different telecom operators. And we did look at many more operators, where some have started giving practical examples of generative AI, whilst others are actually more quiet. But just because some operators haven't announced something, it doesn't mean that they're not looking or wanting to use generative AI. And this is because AI is such a big topic at the moment, and so it's likely it would have been announced. So, we believe that these 56 examples paint quite a comprehensive picture of what's going on at the moment. And so if you go on to the next slide, here are the 30 different telecom operators we have found to be implementing generative AI. So you can see operators from North America, so big ones like AT&T and Verizon. We have smaller operators like SaskTel, big groups in Europe, so Vodafone, Telefonica, Orange, Deutsche Telekom, operators from the Middle East like Zain, and we have operators in Asia like China Telecom, SK Telecom, and Jio. And surprisingly, we also see lots of implementation across Africa, but actually a lot of these are the footprints of Orange and MTN. So we have found implementations across the world, and when we looked at these implementations, we collected and measured various types of data, where, for example, we looked at whether an implementation had been launched or whether it was just a trial or an announcement. So if you go into the next slide, Marina. So the majority of these generative AI implementations in telecoms are still announcements, and that's the dark blue here in 61%. But you can see on the slide that some implementations are in the trial phase and others actually have been launched. So in the top box on the right, these are the telecom operators who are trialing generative AI, so AT&T, Verizon, Vodafone, and so on. Whilst the box at the bottom, you have those who have launched generative AI implementations with the examples of the operators listed. And we also found that it is sometimes kind of the smaller operators that have launched generative AI implementations. And this is because big operators like Vodafone, AT&T, and Verizon, they're looking at much bigger scale implementations, and therefore they're kind of starting with smaller trials. So other data that we've also collected is which large language model the operators are using. And so on the left-hand side, this is showing you the number of implementations, where the majority of implementations involved the major players, OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, AWS, where for OpenAI, 8 out of the 9 implementations involved Microsoft and OpenAI. And this is because Microsoft is a big investor in OpenAI and there's a really strong partnership there. But as well as this, we also found 5 implementations that use other LLM partners. And examples of these include Dialpad, Evidin, and Lighton, and there are a few more examples there. Other companies, such as Geo, are developing and using their own large language models. And actually, for many of the implementations, so about 13, the LLM partner or developer was not actually disclosed. And so following from this, we then wanted to understand, well, what is this generative AI being used for? And the first thing, and actually quite striking, is that generative AI offers opportunities in lots of different areas. And what we found is that over 40% of the implementation, so in orange here, are chatbots. And actually, if we add digital assistants to that, so the 9% in grey, it comes to 50%. So half of the implementations are chatbots and digital assistants. Interestingly, we also found that just over 20%, so the dark blue, are bigger implementations that span across multiple applications, where most of these are in the announcement phase. And most of these operators, so Verizon, Telefonica, Telenor, Orange, these are big operators. Some of them have a multi-market footprint. And so the complexity of what they're doing, attempting to do means that these examples are in the early stages, but they're kind of looking at kind of one big push across the organization. And to kind of highlight an example here, Telefonica plans to integrate generative AI digital services to improve data management and network optimization. And there's more listed in our tracker. So as well as this, as well as generative AI applications, we've also looked at which area of the organization these generative AI implementations can be used. And this is different from applications because a chatbot can be used for several things, customer service or within HR or in sales or marketing and so on. And so what we found was that it's customer service, which is the primary area in telecoms where implementations of generative AI is really driving change. That's the orange and 46%. And actually, most of the implementations aiming to improve customer service involve chatbots or digital assistants. So a couple of examples here, BT is trialing a chatbot, Amy. Telstra has announced a digital assistant called Ask Telstra. And again, there are many more examples in our tracker. Also, what we found is that there are other implementations from other operators which are improving customer service through other ways and not just chatbots. But if you remember from the previous slide, just over 20% of the implementations were involved in multiple generative AI applications. And therefore, it's not surprising that almost 30% of the implementation, so in the dark blue, are in multiple telco functional areas. And therefore, it's no surprise that these operators, that are looking at multiple applications are also looking at multiple functional areas. And so a couple of examples here include AT&T, who wants to use generative AI chatbot called Ask AT&T to assist with software development, security patches, customer support, and data analysis. And another one is that Telenor wants to enable generative AI across its operations from customer service to network management. And so again, these operators and some operators are already looking at one big push across the organization. But we also found when kind of analyzing the data is that telcos are looking at generative AI not just as a way to improve their own operations, but also to generate new revenue. And so from the data we collected, we found that 25% of the implementations are actually generative AI as a service. And again, there's variety here, and I'll just kind of highlight a few examples that we found. So one example is kind of developing your own large language model for the telecom industry. And China Telecom is an example here. Kind of another example is that operators want to offer generative AI solutions to enterprises. So Deutsche Telekom has launched Business GPT, which is a generative AI assistant and helps a number of areas such as content creation or customer service. Orange Business has announced generative AI solutions for businesses to help with document management, reporting, and content generation. And also a final example And actually, it's more of a comprehensive approach, is Swisscom, who has partnered with NVIDIA, looking at not just providing solutions, but also providing kind of infrastructure for generative AI in enterprises. So this is kind of the data that we've collected so far, and we are going to continue to collect data over the next few kind of quarters to see where the operators will be moving regarding generative AI. So I now will pass over to Rosalind, who will talk about generative AI in the future in telecoms.
We can't hear you, Rosalind.
I muted myself earlier because I thought I was going to sneeze. Let me try that again. So thank you, Karina. So in order to explain what we think the leading use cases of generative AI will be in telecoms will be in the future, the kind of next wave of investment, to explain our thinking around that and how we've come to some conclusions, I would like to introduce you to a piece of foundational research that STL Partners has undertaken. This was done for the first time around September last year, but since then has been expanded and updated and refined. It's also actually the kind of foundational research that then the generative AI deployment tracker that Karina was just showing you the results of, it's almost the foundation that was built on, but then it also helps us kind of form opinions about the future and the next wave of investment. So this study included detailed research, categorization and in-depth analysis of both the capabilities of generative AI that have the potential to be valuable within a telco and the specific processes across the whole of a telecoms organization that can benefit from any of these generative AI capabilities, and thus creating a catalogue of potential Gen AI use cases within telecoms. And these two considerations were then brought together to help us judge when different generative AI capabilities are going to be investment priorities across the telecoms market. So I'll dig into this a little, and hopefully it is complex, but hopefully make it a bit clearer and understand kind of how it works. So on the next slide, we're going to start with how we looked at the generative AI capabilities. So STL's research identified 107 distinct capabilities of Gen AI that can be useful for telecoms. And we've grouped these into 7 categories because 107 is too much to think about, but it helps all of us to have these categories. So all of these have multiple kind of detailed specific capabilities within them. But the first group that we've used is content creation. This is probably the capability area of generative AI that we're all the most familiar with. I think we've probably all used it to play with creating or summarizing content. But this also includes capabilities like translation. And in fact, one really interesting and compelling future capability is going to be the ability to translate between machine language and human readable content to enable that more direct communication between humans and machine systems. The second category you can see here is human to machine communication. These are the kinds of capabilities that underlie chatbots and kind of accessibility tech. Then we have the capabilities around human to human communication. So that's supporting and enhancing human to human communication. So these are the capabilities that then underlie digital assistants and some kinds of training applications. The next category we've identified is knowledge management, which includes capabilities like building instruction manuals based on relevant knowledge, building question answering systems. Next, we have process improvement, which includes things like code creation and validation and testing related capabilities. We have data management, which includes things like the ability to generate synthetic data and also augment data sets. And then finally, we have intelligence improvements. And these are the kind of capabilities that will allow generative AI to actually enhance other models and help other models perform better. Now, of course, as we'll see on the next slide, most of these generative AI capabilities are not yet mature. You can see these charts in the middle that we have, as well as kind of cataloging and categorizing these capabilities, we have rated them in terms of when they're going to be mature enough to be available for use and adapted for use within telecoms, which range from being available now to being available in the next 1 to 3 years or 1 to 4 years, and then expected availability that's even kind of further out. And we've seen from Karina that those that are mature are being used by telcos right now. But then there are a lot more, as we can see, that are going to become available in the short to medium term. So as well as rating this kind of maturity and likely timing of availability for every different capability, we've also analysed very carefully what we see as the potential beneficial impact of each capability for the telco. And you can see again that in some of these categories where there's quite a high usefulness score, and then some capabilities that are already mature, these are the kind of categories where we're already seeing implementations. But those where we see a high usefulness score and large numbers of capabilities that are going to come online, we think in the next kind of 1 to 3 years, these are the areas where we expect to see sort of medium-term, really growing attention from telcos in terms of trying to find ways to implement those within their organisation. But this is, of course, just the capability side, and we've also done a parallel, rigorous analysis to identify the use cases within the telecoms organisation where these capabilities can be useful. So on the next slide, exactly these 107 generative AI capabilities feed into 106 use cases that we have identified across the organisation. Of course, it's quite confusing that we have 2 numbers that are so close, but I assure you it's just a coincidence. So there are opportunities, as indeed Karina has already said, there are opportunities to benefit from some generative AI capabilities across the whole telecoms organisation. And across these different, we've kind of categorised 11 different areas of a telecoms organisation. And across these, within these, we've identified specific processes where some of these Gen AI capabilities can provide benefit, and then broken these down into sub-processes, and then broken those down further into detailed and specific use cases that fit within those. So to give a better idea here, one example that I can kind of mention for you is to say, so within the broad area of ecosystem management, one broad process where generative AI capabilities were identified as being applicable and useful is within order management. So then order management is broken down into 2 sub-processes, one of which is CPQ, that is configure, price, quote, and the other sub-process is order handling. And then within each of these sub-processes, in this particular example, each of these have 2 specific generative AI use cases that are identified. And so, for example, within order management, order handling, too many similar words here. Within order handling, those specific processes are proactive issue identification and automation of identifying orders. So those are the kind of use cases that we've identified. Another example that I'm going to mention, because I'm going to come back to this in just the next slide afterwards. Another example, so then, is the broad area of resource management. One process that is within that area is network management, which then actually has 11 different generative AI use cases within it, including, for example, digital twin management, creation and update of coverage maps, and time series analysis and forecasting, among others. It's worth noting at this point that one of the insights to be gained from this work is not only for us to understand where generative AI can provide the most benefit and what capabilities are needed and when they're realistically going to be available to build that future picture, but also to identify the places maybe where Gen AI can be implemented, but perhaps isn't as necessary, where other technology may be more suitable or is doing a good enough job that the Gen AI can't improve on enough for it to be really worth prioritizing. So to help with all of that analysis and understanding, what we've done, you can see on the next slide, is then mapped these those 107 generative AI capabilities with their maturity and usefulness scores. We've mapped them onto the 106 use cases. And of course, it's not a one-to-one relationship. Many use cases need more than one generative AI capability. And going back to one of those use case examples that I had in network management, so one of those use cases that I highlighted there was the creation and update of coverage maps. And that has been identified as requiring capabilities both in content creation and in data management. And both of those have sort of expected availability in the sort of near to medium term. And both of them also have expected medium to high kind of usefulness and beneficial impact scores. So that, for example, is an area that we would expect to see, you know, a certain amount of interest and investment in, not maybe for something that's going to be in use next year, but for something that's going to be in use in 3 years or 4 or 5, with that kind of timescale. You know, there are other complicating factors, but this analysis, you know, provides strong and detailed guidance about where we can start looking to help us build a picture of where we think the priority areas are going to be in terms of generative AI investment in telecoms in the future. So we're drawing to the end of our presentation. We've covered a lot. Marina started with a recap of STL's work on the current adoption patterns and priorities of telcos for the whole range of AI technologies. Karina has showed us how telcos are currently adopting generative AI with specific insights from our Gen AI adoption tracker. And now I've introduced the somewhat unwieldy, but ultimately quite useful analysis that's going to help us prioritize and understand upcoming priorities in Gen AI adoption. So we have some pieces of some conclusions and recommendations on the next slide. It's important to remember that we're still in the early stages of generative AI adoption. A lot more capabilities and use cases will come in the future. Telcos have to get on with this. Strategies can be refined and redirected, but it's really important not to miss the opportunity by dithering too much. Also, you know, don't get caught up in generative AI hype. It's not always the right tool for the job. Many other AI technologies have and will provide excellent benefits for telecoms. And also, crucially, keep an eye on learnings from competitors. This is why we have a generative AI adoption tracker and why we will continue to update it as time moves on. There's a couple of other things before I open up for questions. There's a couple of other things that I wanted to highlight. As Marina mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, STL Partners has extensive research around the topic of AI, as you'll see on the next slide. You know, what we've shown you today is just a couple of aspects of it. We've covered a lot of different areas, including the financial value of AI for telcos, specific use cases for Gen AI, which obviously you've seen. We have further research on AI as a service. We have a lot of intelligence on AI in the network. We're particularly proud of the work that we've done on building AI capabilities in the organization and how you create that organization that can really benefit from AI. And then obviously the practical examples, some of which we've shown you today. So if you would like to hear about any of our other research or just to know what we have on offer, you know, please get in touch. We'd love to talk to you about it. And finally, we mentioned to you already a webinar that you can download a recording of, but we have another one coming up. This is a kind of a series of 3, as it were. So on Wednesday, the 26th of June, we have an upcoming webinar on the current status and next steps in telco AI. But what's really exciting about this is this is actually where we're going to present the findings of a survey of 100 leading telecoms AI decision makers. So there's some real up-to-date intelligence that's going to be offered and presented in that webinar. So I think the registration link has just popped up in the chat. So if you think you would be interested or just want to be able to get the recording afterwards, please sign up. And now I know that there have been questions coming in, so we will do our best to answer them now. And if there are any that we don't get to, we will be kind of catching up offline and sharing a post-webinar document with the kind of our full responses. But anyway, let's see what we can do now.
So I can kick off with the questions. So the first one is kind of the benefits and downsides of telecom operators in kind of developing their own large language models versus using existing ones from major tech companies. And so I'll kind of just highlight kind of maybe some of the drawbacks and benefits, but I think some of the downsides is the costs. Developing and maintaining these models requires significant investment in terms of time and money, human resources and infrastructure. The process of developing these models is complex. It requires a high level of expertise in AI and machine learning. This might not be readily available within the company. And so operators will need to hire individuals, with these specialized skills, and that's, not easy to find. It's quite a big undertaking. I think as well as this, building models from scratch can be time consuming, and it could lead to a delay in the deployment of these AI solutions. So operators may miss out on opportunities because of this and even lag behind competitors who are using existing models. But kind of related to the benefits, although initial costs might be higher, long-term costs, perhaps could be lower if you're optimizing efficiency across the company in certain ways. And I think another kind of benefit for developing their own model is, they can tailor it to meet the specific needs and requirements of their businesses and easily update and adapt their models. And also, they can kind of have greater control over their data. You're not relying on someone else. So yeah, that's kind of all the couple of benefits and the downsides with that.
I can see in the chat there's another question that has come, which is around maturity level of AI encoding, especially enterprise level applications in telcos. Now, if I take this question, I would say, first of all, we do see already some examples of using AI for coding, but I think it's early days. And we think that this will be one of the more valuable use cases, certainly one of our valuable capabilities of AI for telcos. And one of the main reasons is that telecoms in many countries compete with hyperscalers for developers, and it's a difficult market. And we think that where some telecoms might find it difficult to fill in those roles or fill them in a cost-effective manner, AI can really help over time to create simple pieces of code, to check code, to look at the quality and so on. But it's an early day. It's still early days. So we see some implementations, but just remember that these are early days. So in terms of maturity, we see already a few telcos doing it, but a lot more will come in the future.
I can see the second question that's come in through the chat, which I can kind of start with some comments on, but Karina or Marina may also want to add something. So this question is, are you seeing any use case adoption on the network side network engineering, network analytics, also known as RAN GPT or network health related Gen AI. Now on within the use case tracker, I believe there were a couple that are categorized as within the network, which Karina can maybe in a minute, may be able to discuss the examples, or we can just bring them up offline. But what I would say, from having spoken to many kind of quite senior network engineers and network architects at events recently, that many of them are in no great hurry. They feel they're getting a bit of pressure from on high because of the kind of the hype around generative AI. But in many of these kind of network potential use cases, there are some potentially really powerful use cases for generative AI. But what's coming on more in the short to medium term is continuation of what they're already doing, of using other AI models to further, to further network automation, and that generative AI, that there seems to be a bit of a backlash in that community, I would say. But this being said, there is some adoption in the network space.
Yeah, I mean, I can, so in terms of like network management, I think the kind of implementations that we've seen, you want to use generative AI to kind of analyze network data and performance metrics and identify potential issues and implement kind of self-healing or corrective measures to prevent these surface disruptions. And I think some of these, are announcements, so they haven't maybe gone into the specifics, but are aiming to kind of, be involved with network management. And also kind of another one might be involved in being kind of optimized kind of planning and deployment as well.
Great. Thank you. There's a question, it's a very simple question. It says no meta in the LLMs used by telcos, and that's right. I just checked the slide, and that's correct. It seems like if any of the telcos are using particularly Llama 2 as a model, they have not disclosed that. So the slide was showing all the data that we have seen disclosed, with OpenAI leading the way and Microsoft coming next. A lot of that would be Copilot through 365, Microsoft 365. We've seen Google, we see Amazon now. Amazon, of course, it has its own model and it works with partners. So some of the Amazon application kind of usages of Amazon implementations with Amazon would be other models as well, but done through AWS. But no, we actually haven't seen anybody disclosing to work with Meta's Llama 2. Then I think we already discussed why in the network the LLMs deployed, and that it's early days.
There's another question. Sorry, yeah. Marina. Yeah, there's another one with about Copilot and Microsoft, and there are a few examples where telcos are using Copilot. So that's in our tracker.
Yeah, there's a question on section 2. Are we seeing benefits, data points emerge from main AI implementations such as customer service and network optimization to further cement business cases? So I think we are not seeing that many telcos showing off kind of real results, as in here is my results quantified. But we did share with you the example of MTN. But once again, bear in mind that these are early days, and I think all of these telcos understand very well that these are investments for the long term. And if anything, we're so pleased to see that telcos are looking at AI and investing in AI, not just as a cost-cutting measure, but also as a way to grow revenues in the future. So in places like even customer service and network optimization, some of these are about cost-cutting. But in customer service, in some cases, these use cases are about finding a way to sell more to these customers and to extract more value from these customers, to deliver and therefore extract more value from these customers. So I think we need to be patient with telcos before we see some data points about the actual return on investment, because this is an investment in the longer term. Next question. Yeah, go ahead.
There's also, I was just going to bring up a next question that's on a bit of a different area. Someone is asking, have you identified any use cases implemented or not yet, just identified, for operators in the consumer space? Now, I'm sure Marina will have comments about this as well, but I would say that obviously, you know, things like chatbots and Q&A, yes, FAQ, that's the acronym I want. Chatbot and FAQ type implementations, they don't have to be consumer, but they obviously, you know, are relevant for consumer, and some of those chatbot deployments are very much in the consumer space. But there's also sort of identified use cases around things like improving personalization, and indeed, you know, that idea of using, you know, n equals 1 is that notion of improved personalization. But we have identified those types of use cases that are really about sort of tailoring experience and tailoring marketing.
Yes,
so subtly different use cases in those kinds of spaces.
I agree. Certainly in customer care, we see an awful lot of, well, a lot of use cases. I think when we say an awful lot of use cases and a lot of use cases, you have to, again, remember that in those days when we count, say, 50 implementations, we're quite pleased to see these 50. Now, if your question was specifically about offering AI to consumers, I have to say that that's not something we're seeing yet. And the consumer proposition, as in kind of finding a way of helping consumers to use AI, that's still in the hands of obviously OpenAI and Google and Microsoft and now obviously Apple with its latest announcement. But where operators are looking at offering AI as a service, at the moment, it is predominantly to their enterprise base and sometimes to other telcos. But I think from the operator perspective, it's quite easy to see the opportunity in the enterprise space, because now that kind of the knowledge the awareness of AI and of generative AI specifically is so wide and the usage is so democratized, it's clear that a lot of enterprises are looking at AI and wondering how to implement it and how to take advantage of it. And they will need partners to do that. And telecoms are sitting in a really good place if they invest in the right time, within the right product, and within the right kind of approach to these enterprise customers to take advantage of this opportunity. I think the consumer opportunity may be a little bit more nebulous at the moment. And again, obviously, we know that a lot of consumers are using ChatGPT, but it's not necessarily something that operators, we have seen use cases of operators actually offering consumer products where kind of consumers can utilize AI specifically within the product beyond what hyperscalers are already offering. I mean, we have so many questions. I'm just trying to find the next. I didn't see all of them initially, and I thought, oh, we only have 4 or 5, but actually there are tens of questions. You mentioned the Jenny. Well, we have here a question of, did you distinguish between data provided by text, images, and others within the Gen AI use cases? I think I have to say, we haven't looked at them from kind of the output level. And I have to say, if you're thinking about sort of content creation is just one group of use cases in terms of output of text and image, etc. A lot of the more valuable use cases, as Rosalind discussed, was in the other groups of use cases where it's kind of machine to machine, machine to human to machine, so I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
I mean,
but yeah.
In terms of those generative AI capabilities and things like content creation as a grouping of capabilities, within that we have, I'd say about 15 different capabilities, which are then subgrouped into ones that are to do with text, ones that are to do with images. There's what about 3D model creation. And in general, they're not, those in content creation are not the capabilities that have really, that are expected to have the greatest value. But that's not 100% true, because there are some use cases, we talked about things around network planning and the creation of maps, whether that's existing coverage maps or modeling future scenarios, where image creation is an integral part of that. So then it has great value, because that seems to be a valuable use case.
There's a very quick question here about, in the MTN case, how much is the gain in terms of market share and in terms of NPS, Net Promoter Score? I don't think that was disclosed by MTN kind of when they have shared publicly the kind of the outcome of their investment in AI. Obviously, we have to kind of look at the whole gain as a whole. So we can't really tell you, can't answer this question very specifically, but I think the value for the company has been kind of in the aggregate. So it's market share up, NPS up, very importantly, again, churn down, and that helps with the market share. So a lot of these metrics are interrelated. Higher NPS would probably lead to market share, to higher market share. So a lot of these metrics are connected, but we were really impressed by the fact that MTN was able to measure the success of this investment so quickly. Another quick question, which is when do you expect to have a session which goes into more detail about telcos providing AI services or products to their customers? And that's a topic. AI as a service is a topic that we are looking at very closely. So I can't give you a specific time frame, but over the next few months, we'll be working on this topic a lot.
There's another one, which is have the telcos who've already implemented AI shared any benefit stats yet? And I think because many of these have been launched, very recently, there's not that information available, but I think it probably would be something that would be available at much later date.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking more broadly about more mature AI technologies, so not generative AI, but other AI technologies. There are different times when telcos have given indications of benefits of particular projects, but that's a pretty diverse kind of range of topics. But in this generative AI specifically space, it's really too immature for them, to have, to really know what the results are yet. I've also seen one here. We're nearly at time, but this one's got quite a short answer. Somebody's asked, are telcos leaning more towards build or more towards buy? And you can see, certainly from one of the charts that Karina shared, that while there are some who are opting to build for specific reasons, that the bigger trend is towards buy.
Yeah. And obviously, Karina discussed, the first question was around kind of the benefits of one or the other approach. But yeah, there are a lot more questions. We will aim to answer them in a Q&A document and share. As discussed in the beginning, everybody will receive a copy of the slides and a link to the recording, and we'll share the Q&A document. But maybe at this time, we're kind of at time, so I'd like to just say thank you very much for your interest in our webinar and in STL in general. And if you would like to hear more from us, you know where we are. Please get in touch. and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
So
Thank you all very
Karina,
much.
Rosalind,
Thank you.
and speak to you soon.
Thank you.